I never told my wife's family I owned the 16.9 motor company that paid their salaries. Then they threw my daughter out in the snow on Christmas Eve. The night my daughter called me sobbing from a snow-covered porch, I was elbow deep in a burst pipe at a commercial property I owned. I want you to sit with that for a second. My 16-year-old was standing outside in a thin holiday sweater, shaking in 22-degree weather, while 40 members of her mother's family laughed and drank eggnog on the other side of a lit window. And I was 90 minutes away, soaked to the wrist in freezing water, fixing a problem in a building that my name was on the deed for. That's the part they never knew. That's the part I'd hidden for 8 years at my wife's request. And that's the part that was about to end every single one of their careers before the new year. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The toolbox husband. My name is Daniel Whitaker. I'm 41 years old. I founded Whitaker Home Solutions in 2011 with $18,000 I'd saved working construction, a used van, and a contractor's license I'd earned the year before my daughter was born. By 2023, the company had 44 full-time employees, 3 regional managers, and a gross annual revenue of $9 million. We handled residential and commercial maintenance contracts across 5 counties. We were small enough to be personal, large enough to be institutional. I was proud of it in the quiet way that only people who built things from nothing understand. My wife Claire was proud of different things. She was proud of her family name. She was proud of the Collins family reputation, old money aesthetics with new money anxiety, which is the worst possible combination. Her father, Martin Collins, had spent 30 years in middle management at a paper distribution company and had developed the unshakable belief that a man's worth lived entirely in his collar color and his zip code. Martin was the kind of man who used the word class the way other people use the word God, constantly, reverently, and almost always to look down at someone else. When Claire brought me home the first time, I wore jeans and work boots. I drove a Ford F-250 with a mud flap missing on the passenger side. Martin looked me up and down the way a man examines produce he's already decided to put back. Handyman, he said, not a question, an assessment. Field supervisor, Claire said quickly. That was the first lie, and it slid out of her so easily that I almost missed it. I told myself it didn't matter. I was in love. I was 33 years old and completely disarmed by a woman who laughed at my jokes and didn't care that my hands were calloused. We got married 8 months later at a small ceremony. The Collins family came in coordinated outfits, like a team. I wore my best blazer and got 3 comments about it before dinner. After the wedding, Claire sat me down with both her hands on mine and those clear green eyes doing the thing they always did when she needed something. They're proud people, Daniel. They'll never accept you if they know. Just let them think you're a supervisor. Please, let me handle my family. I should have asked what handling them looked like long term. I didn't. What I did was nod, squeeze her hands, and quietly fold my entire identity into a box I hid in the basement of our marriage for 8 years. The architecture of silence. Here's what 8 years of silence looks like from the inside. You attend 43 Collins family gatherings. You eat at a table where your father-in-law makes jokes about your truck. You smile. You pass the bread basket. You listen to Martin describe your profession as glorified plumbing. While he's wearing a watch your company's quarterly profit could buy 12 times over. You watch your brother-in-law David Collins get hired because Claire quietly recommended him to you, and you quietly put him on payroll at $71,000 a year because you love your wife and want peace at Christmas. Then David's brother Marcus, then Martin's nephew Tyler, then 4 cousins, 2 uncles, a family friend named Greg, who Martin vouched for personally, and eventually, inevitably, you open the employee directory and type the word Collins and watch 11 names populate before you even finish the search. 47 people total had some Collins family connection in that company. Not all of them knew each other. Not all of them were family. But enough of them were that the whole thing had a quiet, cancerous quality I chose not to examine too closely. Because Claire asked me not to. Because I loved her. Because sometimes love is just the slow accumulation of choices that seem small at the time. I let Martin spend my money while mocking my boots. I let Linda, Claire's mother, a precise woman who wore silk scarves like armor, offer me money for a decent church suit at Easter dinner in 2019. I put the envelope back in her hand without opening it and said, I appreciate the thought, Linda, and I meant it, which was the most humiliating part. I told myself it was a long game. I told myself none of it mattered because I knew the truth, even if they didn't. I told myself a lot of things that sounded more noble than they were. What it really was. I was ashamed to disrupt Claire's happiness, even when that happiness came at the cost of mine. Then came Christmas Eve, 2023, 9:12 p.m. The pipe burst at the Kellerman Commercial Plaza at 7:50 p.m., a 72-unit property we'd held a maintenance contract on for 4 years. The on-call guy, a good kid named Pete Reyes, got there first, assessed it, and called me because the damage had hit the main line, and the fix required a judgment call I needed to make in person. I called Claire. She was already at her parents' house with Sophie, our daughter. I told her I'd be 2 hours behind, maybe more. She sighed the way she always sighed, like I'd done it on purpose, and said, Fine, Daniel. We'll see you when we see you. I drove to the Kellerman property. I got in the crawl space space. I started working. My phone rang at 9:12 p.m. I almost didn't answer. I was halfway through a coupling replacement and my hands were filthy and numb. But I saw Sophie's name on the screen and something parental and involuntary made me grab it. Dad, her voice was jagged, wind in the background. Please come get me. I'm outside. It's freezing. I came out of the crawl space so fast I cracked my shoulder on a beam. What? Where are you? What happened? The front porch. Grandpa Martin was making fun of your truck again. The thing about the missing mud flap, and I told him to stop. I told him it wasn't funny. A pause. I could hear her trying to control her breathing. He got really mad. He said I was being disrespectful in his house. And then he opened the front door and told me to wait outside until I could apologize. My jaw tightened. Where's your mother? The silence that followed was 3 seconds long. It told me everything. She said I should just apologize, Dad. I was already walking to my truck. Sophie, listen to me. I'm getting in the car right now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Are you dressed warmly enough? I have my sweater. I left my coat inside. 22 degrees. A thin holiday sweater. My 16-year-old daughter on a front porch because she defended my name. I drove 91 minutes of road in 63 minutes. I remember almost nothing about the drive except the temperature reading on my dashboard, 20 degrees, and the specific crystalline quality of the anger settling into my chest. Not hot, not explosive, cold. The kind of cold that doesn't warm up. What I saw through the window. She was standing at the far end of the porch, arms wrapped around herself, her backpack on the ground at her feet like she'd set it there with the intention of leaving and then hadn't known where to go. Through the Collins front window, firelight, movement, the glow of the Christmas tree. I could see Martin at the head of the table, laughing at something. I could see Claire near the kitchen doorway, a champagne flute in her hand, her head tilted in the particular way she tilted it when she was being charming for an audience. She hadn't come outside once. I wrapped my coat around Sophie without saying anything. She turned and grabbed me hard around the ribs, the way she used to when she was small and I came home from a long shift and she'd sprint across the living room. I held her for a long moment. She was shaking. Then I walked to the front door and kicked it open. Not knocked, kicked. The door swung wide and hit the inside wall with a crack like a starter pistol, and 40 people went completely silent in under 3 seconds. Music off, forks down, 40 faces turning. Martin stood near the fireplace with a drink in his hand, looking suddenly smaller than he had through the window. I scanned the room until I found Sophie's coat on a chair near the door. I picked it up. I turned back to the door to hand it to her. That's when Claire appeared. She crossed the room with that particular walk, the one I'd admired for 8 years, purposeful and smooth, and she was holding something, a manila folder, thick, bound with a rubber band. She walked straight to me and pressed it against my chest, hard enough that I had to take it or drop it. You've embarrassed this family long enough, she said. Her voice was steady, practiced. She'd rehearsed this. These are divorce papers. I want you out of my house by tomorrow morning. Behind her, Martin stepped forward. He was grinning, the grin of a man who has been waiting to watch this happen for a long time. Best Christmas gift she ever gave herself. He looked past me, through the open door at Sophie. Tell your loser father to put some gas in his trash truck before it breaks down on the way home. Somebody laughed. More than one somebody. I looked at Martin Collins. I looked at Claire. I looked at the room. Every cousin, every uncle, every nephew, every family friend, every person whose mortgage I had in some form or fashion helped pay for the last 8 years. Some of them were looking at the floor. Some of them were looking at me the way people look at a dog that's outlived its usefulness. I tucked the divorce papers under my arm. You're right, Claire, I said. It is time. I walked out. Sophie was already at my truck. They thought they'd just thrown out a broke handyman. What happens when the temperature drops below zero? We drove for 20 minutes without talking. Sophie had her knees pulled up to her chest, her coat finally on, the heat in the truck running full blast. She was staring out the passenger window at the dark. Dad, she finally said. Yeah, baby. I'm sorry I made it worse. I had to grip the steering wheel hard enough to feel my knuckles. You made it better, I said. You made it the truest it's ever been. She fell asleep on the way to the hotel I booked from a red light on Route 9. A Marriott courtyard, 2 queen beds, a room service menu neither of us would look at until morning. I sat in the dark for a while after she fell asleep, the divorce papers spread on the desk, reading through them with a business person's eye. They were thorough. A family law attorney named Gregory Foss had drafted them. I Googled him immediately. 12 years in practice, mid-tier firm, specializing in high net worth divorces, which told me Claire had been planning this long enough to do her research. The papers cited irreconcilable differences. They requested the house, a significant portion of liquid assets, and listed my primary income source as salaried employment at an unnamed residential services company. She still didn't know. Or she did, and had deliberately obscured it to limit what she thought I was worth. Either way. I opened my laptop at 11:48 p.m. I opened the employee directory. I typed the word Collins, 47 names, the audit. I want to be precise about this part because it matters. I didn't fire anyone out of anger. I didn't make a single decision with my hands shaking or my jaw tight. I sat in a hotel room chair with terrible lumbar support, and I ran a full internal audit with the same systematic patience I used on every major company decision I'd made for 12 years. I had audit software, Aprio, the same platform we'd used for 2 years for quarterly compliance reviews. reviews. I launched it at midnight. I set the parameters to flag inconsistencies in the Collins connected employee records going back 36 months. The results took 94 minutes to compile. I made a cup of bad hotel coffee and read every line. David Collins, my brother-in-law, regional procurement supervisor, had been falsifying fuel card records for 19 months. Total discrepancy, $34,200. Company vehicles had been used for 3 family vacations, documented by GPS logs that didn't match assigned route schedules. Marcus Collins, accounts receivable, had been running duplicate invoice submissions on 6 client accounts. He'd pocketed the difference through a shell email he'd set up on a free provider. It was almost elegant in its stupidity. Total exposure, $61,400. Martin Collins himself wasn't on my payroll, but he was named as the recipient of 4 client entertainment expenses submitted by David and Marcus between 2021 and 2023. Restaurant bills, a resort stay in Scottsdale, 2 rounds of golf at a club that charges $400 a round, all submitted as legitimate business expenses. I kept going. By 3:30 a.m., I had 47 employee files, and 14 of them had some form of documented financial irregularity. The remaining 33 had clean records, some of them legitimately good employees who happened to share a last name or a family connection. I separated those files. For the 14, I documented everything. I printed nothing. I saved the audit to the company's encrypted server, time-stamped and locked. Then I called my attorney. The attorney, his name is Robert Kane. He's been my corporate attorney since 2014. He's 62 years old, has a face like a bloodhound, and has never once lost his composure in my presence, which is part of why I trust him more than almost anyone alive. I called him at 3:47 a.m. He answered on the 3rd ring because that's the kind of attorney Robert Kane is. I told him everything. The whole 8 years, the Collins network, the audit findings, the divorce papers served at a Christmas party while my daughter stood in the snow outside. He was quiet for 11 seconds. I counted. Okay, he said. Here's what we do. He walked me through it in his methodical, completely unexcited way. First, he would file an emergency motion the next morning to separate my personal assets from any marital property claims. The house Claire called hers was owned by one of my LLCs. The title was clean. The mortgage was paid by the company, and Claire's name appeared nowhere on the deed. He would send her a notice to vacate through Gregory Foss's office. Second, the 14 employees with documented fraud exposure would receive termination letters through HR, each one referencing specific policy violations and audit findings. The terminations would be legally bulletproof. 3 of them, David, Marcus, and the shell invoice situation, would be referred to the district attorney's office for review. Robert would loop in a forensic accountant named Patricia Huang at his firm, who held a CPA, a CFE certification, and 15 years of experience testifying in financial fraud cases. Third, nothing public, no press, no social media, clean, legal, institutional consequences. This stays in proper channels, Robert said. You want justice, not theater. I want both, I said. He was quiet again for a moment. You'll get both, he said. Trust the process. I slept 3 hours. Wednesday morning. I wore a navy suit I kept at the office for investor meetings. I drove to our glass facade headquarters on Harrington Drive at 8:30 a.m. and sat in my corner office with the city view and a coffee that actually cost money. At 8:58 a.m., Patricia Huang, Robert's forensic accountant, sent me a confirmation that the audit documentation had been received, secured, and formatted for potential legal proceedings. She would be available to testify if it reached that stage. At 9 a.m., my HR director, James Okonkwo, began transmitting the termination letters. James had been with me for 6 years. He was rigorous, precise, and had said nothing to me after I briefed him Tuesday night, except, I'll need 2 hours to make sure each letter is airtight. He took 2 hours. They were airtight. At 9:05 a.m., my phone rang. Martin Collins. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. Daniel! His voice had that quality it got when he needed something. Warm and forceful at the same time, like a shove dressed up as a hug. Some complete idiot sent termination letters to half the family this morning. I don't know what kind of HR circus you people are running over there, but you need to get me your supervisor's number so I can get this straightened out. I let the silence go 4 full seconds. You're already speaking to him, Martin. Nothing. The sound of a room that has stopped breathing. Whitaker Home Solutions, I said. Whitaker, as in Daniel Whitaker. Founder, sole owner, chief executive officer. That's not. The audit found significant financial irregularities in multiple employee accounts with Collins family connection. David and Marcus are being referred to the district attorney for embezzlement review. The documentation has been secured by a certified forensic examiner. You'll be receiving correspondence from my attorney, Robert Kane, regarding your name appearing in 4 fraudulent expense reports. Daniel, please, listen. The notice to vacate the property at 14 Ashwood Lane has been sent to Claire through her attorney. The deed is registered to one of my LLCs. She has 30 days. Just let me explain. Merry Christmas, Martin. I ended the call. Then I blocked him. My phone screen lit up within 45 seconds, then kept lighting up. I watched the notifications stack. 12, 20, 31, 47, incoming calls and texts from numbers I recognized and numbers I didn't. Cousins, uncles, a family friend named Greg who was genuinely a good plumber and was probably furious he'd been caught in the fallout of people he barely knew. I would eventually separate the clean terminations from the fraudulent ones. The 14 with documented cause would stand. The 33 clean employees would receive severance and positive references. I wasn't burning the innocent because I was angry. I was angry and also precise, which is a significantly more effective combination. I set my phone face down on the desk. Then I noticed one notification I hadn't dismissed. A text from a number I didn't have saved. Received at 7:14 a.m. before everything had started. It read, "We need to talk. I know what Claire did before the divorce papers. All of it." The text. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct, the one I'm least proud of, was to ignore it. My life was already detonating in extremely organized, legally defensible ways, and the last thing I needed was an anonymous text designed to either help me or manipulate me into something I'd regret. My second instinct was better. I forwarded it to Robert. He called me back in 8 minutes. "Do you know the number?" "No. The area code is local. Give me an hour." Robert called back in 45 minutes with a name. Karen Delaney, 44 years old, former employee of Gregory Foss's law firm, the attorney who had drafted Claire's divorce papers. She had been a paralegal there for 6 years. She had resigned 11 days ago. I called her. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Whitaker." Her voice was careful, the voice of someone who has been rehearsing what they want to say and is trying not to need it. "Ms. Delaney, I need you to understand that I'm not doing this for money," she said. "I resigned because I was asked to do something I wasn't comfortable with. I've been trying to decide what to do about it for 2 weeks. Tell me." She did. Claire had consulted Gregory Foss's firm not 2 or 3 months ago, as I had assumed from the thickness of the paperwork, but 14 months ago, January 2023. She had been planning this divorce, according to Karen Delaney, for over a year. But that wasn't the uncomfortable part. The uncomfortable part was what Claire had asked Foss to do. She had provided the firm with documentation about Whitaker Home Solutions, corporate filings, estimated valuations, asset listings, and had asked Foss to advise her on how to structure the divorce so that the company's true value would be obscured in the asset discovery phase. Foss had walked her through a theory. If Daniel Whitaker's employment could be characterized as a salaried position rather than ownership, if, for instance, the company were listed as an unnamed employer in the divorce filing, then the initial filing would dramatically undervalue the marital estate. It would force Daniel into a protracted disclosure process that could take 18 months. Meanwhile, Claire would petition for interim support based on the artificially deflated picture. She had known, for at least a year, she'd known what the company was worth and had been strategically building a legal architecture to get as much of it as she could while I sat at Christmas dinner and passed her mother the breadbasket. Karen Delaney had been asked to notarize a document she believed misrepresented the company's ownership structure. She refused. She resigned, and she had been sitting with what she knew for 11 days, trying to decide if she owed a stranger the truth. She did, and she told it. What Patricia found, I brought Karen's information to Robert, who brought it to Patricia Huang. Patricia, CFE, CPA, 15 years of financial forensics, the kind of woman who describes embezzlement schemes in court with the same flat effect a meteorologist uses to describe rain, spent 6 days going through the joint financial accounts, the corporate filings, and the documentation Karen Delaney provided. Her findings arrived in a 43-page report on December 31st. The headline, "In the 18 months prior to the divorce filing, Claire had moved $340,000 from a joint savings account into an account in her own name, characterized across multiple transfers as household expenses. The moves were timed to avoid the $10,000 reporting threshold. The money had then been moved into a brokerage account, opened in her maiden name, Collins, at a firm in another county." Patricia wrote in her summary, "The pattern, timing, and structure of the transfers suggest deliberate concealment consistent with asset dissipation in anticipation of divorce proceedings. That's forensic accountant for, she stole it and tried to hide it." Robert filed an amended response to the divorce petition on January 4th. He attached Patricia's full report as Exhibit A. He attached Karen Delaney's sworn affidavit, which she had agreed to provide, as Exhibit B. He attached the full corporate audit findings as Exhibit C. Gregory Foss, upon receiving the filing, withdrew from Claire's representation within 72 hours. I found out later through Robert that Foss had consulted with his own ethics attorney immediately after receiving our response. Whatever that conversation contained, it ended his involvement in the case. Claire retained new counsel. Her new attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Diane Marsh, called Robert the same week and opened with, "My client is prepared to discuss a settlement. What justice actually looks like. I want to be honest about something, because this story could very easily become about the satisfaction of watching people fall, and I think that would make it smaller than it actually was." David Collins was charged with embezzlement in February. Marcus Collins was charged in March. They both retained separate attorneys and both, as far as I know at the time of writing, are navigating the criminal process. I hold no particular satisfaction about this. They made choices, and and those choices have consequences, and the county district attorney's office is the appropriate place for that to play out. The 33 employees who were terminated for non-fraudulent reasons received severance packages, 2 weeks per year of service, and positive references. 3 of them have since been rehired at other companies where I have professional relationships. One of them, a project manager named Celeste Ruiz, who had been with me for 4 years and whose only crime was being Martin's goddaughter, called me 6 weeks after the terminations to say she understood and bore no anger. That call was harder to receive than almost anything else in this entire story. The divorce was settled in March. I won't detail the specific numbers because that's between Robert, Diane Marsh, and the family court judge who reviewed the settlement. What I will say is that the characterization of my income as salaried employment did not survive contact with Patricia Huang's report. Claire received what she was legally entitled to, and not a dollar of what she'd tried to engineer. She's living with her parents. I know this because Sophie told me. Sophie, who spent the holidays with me in a hotel room eating room service, and then spent January helping me move into a rented townhouse with a functioning furnace and a guest room, I put her stuff in immediately. "Do you need me to get more things from Mom's?" she asked one afternoon in January, standing in the doorway of the guest room with a box of her books. "Only what you want," I said. She thought about it for a moment. "I want the books," she said. "I don't need the other stuff." Martin's last call. He called me one more time. March 8th, 11:22 a.m. I don't know how he got a number that wasn't blocked. A new work cell, maybe. Or someone in my office who didn't know better. He left a voicemail. I have listened to it exactly once. He sounded old, quieter than I'd ever heard him. The voice of a man who had been in a room he thought he controlled and had suddenly looked up to find that the walls were someone else's property. "Daniel," he said, "I want you to know that I didn't realize about the company, about who you were. I'd like to apologize for the things I said over the years, to you and to Sophie." He paused for a long time. "I didn't know. Here's the thing I've thought about most in the months since." He meant that last part as an explanation, maybe even as a partial excuse. "I didn't know who you really were, so I had some justification for treating you the way I did, but that's exactly the wrong lesson. You didn't treat me badly because you thought I was poor, Martin. You treated me badly because you thought it was acceptable to treat poor people badly. The only thing my money changed is whether you had consequences for it. I didn't call him back. I didn't block the number either. I just let it sit there. One voicemail in a list, which felt like the truest response I had. What actually matters. It's June now, 7 months since Christmas Eve. Sophie finished sophomore year with a 3.8 GPA and a part-time job at a landscaping company. Her choice, not mine, though I suspect she's building her own story about what it means to earn things from the ground up. She and I have dinner twice a week. We talk more honestly than we ever did when I was performing a version of myself for an audience that didn't deserve it. Whitaker Home Solutions had its best first quarter in company history, $12 million in the pipeline. James Okonkwo got a promotion and used part of his raise to take his family to Portugal, which is the best sentence I've written in a long time. The Navy suit is hanging in my closet. I wore it to the January board meeting, and I'll wear it to the next one. Most days, I wear whatever I want. Last week, I drove the F-250 to a client meeting, a new commercial property management group, 7 figures in potential annual contracts. Their CEO met me in the parking lot as I climbed out of the truck and looked at it the way people sometimes look at old trucks, part confusion, part respect. "Good truck," he said. "She runs," I said. We shook hands and went inside and closed the deal. I drove home with the windows down. The mud flap is still missing on the passenger side. I keep meaning to fix it. Maybe I'll leave it.